So there I was, stuck in one of those weird little chairs that somehow managed to be both uncomfortable and incredibly dull, staring at the spinning metal wheel of the plasma donation machine, like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. I never thought I'd say this, but donating plasma is basically my new Friday night ritual, partly because the money helps, and partly because it's a good excuse to get out of the apartment without having to make small talk at a bar or pretend to be into some new workout class. This particular evening was shaping up to be as uneventful as the last dozen times I'd been there. The sterile white walls, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional beep from one of the machines. It was all kind of soothing in a weird way. I was scrolling through my phone, absently watching a video about some guy trying to teach his dog to skateboard, when I noticed him. He was sitting in the chair next to me, looking way more relaxed than I felt, like he'd been doing this for years. He had this easy smile, the kind that makes you think he genuinely liked what he was doing, or maybe just liked the moment. I watched as he adjusted the sleeve on his arm, revealing a tattoo I hadn't expected, some sort of minimalist mountain range. It struck me as funny because here we were, stuck in this fluorescent-lit clinic, and there he was, wearing what looked like a badge of some outdoor adventure I'd never had the guts to try. When our eyes met, he gave that slow, almost shy grin, and I felt a weird jolt. Like, maybe this wasn't going to be just another boring night. We started chatting, first about the process itself. He was a regular too, and he knew all the little hacks to get through it faster. His name was Jamie, and he had this laid-back vibe, kind of like the opposite of me, who tends to overthink every tiny thing. He worked in graphic design, which I found pretty cool because I'm terrible with anything creative. We joked about how donating plasma was the closest we'd get to being superheroes, saving lives one pint at a time. As the minutes ticked by and the machine did its thing, our conversation drifted from plasma to music, then to favorite movies, and suddenly I realized I was actually looking forward to the next donation day, not just for the cash, but because I wanted to see Jamie again. It felt strange, like finding a tiny island of connection in the middle of a routine task that usually feels like a necessary evil. That's when he said it, almost casually, like it was no big deal, but my heart definitely said otherwise. Hey, since we're both stuck here for a while, do you want to grab dinner sometime? Maybe after this? I blinked, caught off guard but grinning like an idiot. Dinner? With Jamie? After donating plasma? Somehow, that sounded way better than any Friday night I'd planned. And just like that, what began as a boring night turned into the start of something I hadn't seen coming at all. I'm pretty sure my brain short-circuited for a second after he asked me that. I mean, who actually gets asked out in a place like that? It's not exactly the setting where you expect sparks to fly, unless you're like a TV show and plasma donation centers are the new dating hotspots, which I highly doubt. But there it was, Jamie casually dropping a dinner invite like it was the most normal thing in the world. Yeah, sure, I said, probably sounding way too eager, but honestly, I wasn't about to talk myself out of it. That sounds good. He smiled again, and I swear, the fluorescent lighting suddenly looked softer, or maybe it was just me seeing things. Cool. I know this little place not too far from here. They have killer tacos and really good margaritas. Tacos and margaritas? I was sold already. I mean, who says no to tacos? Plus, the fact that it wasn't some overhyped, overpriced place made it feel even better. I guess he could tell I was into it because he added, "No pressure. You don't have to decide now. We can just play it by ear." But honestly, I couldn't stop thinking about it for the rest of the donation. Usually, the drive home after giving plasma feels like a foggy, tired blur, but this time, my mind was buzzing. I kept replaying our conversation, how easy it was to talk to him, how he made me laugh without trying, and how, for once, I wasn't scrolling through my phone just to kill time. We exchanged numbers before leaving, and Jamie texted me like 30 minutes later with a simple, "Hey, so, dinner tomorrow night?" Not exactly a grand romantic gesture, but it was genuine and easy, kind of like how I hoped things would go. The next evening, I found myself standing outside this tiny, unassuming taco joint that Jamie had picked. The neon sign buzzed softly above the door, and the warm glow from inside felt kind of inviting. I was nervous, sure, but in a way that was like butterflies instead of a pit in my stomach. I checked my phone one last time took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Jamie was already there, waving me over with that same relaxed smile. He looked good, like he'd just rolled out of some indie movie. Denim jacket, messy hair that looked effortlessly perfect, and those eyes that somehow managed to be both intense and gentle. I felt my confidence wobble for a second, but I reminded myself he was just a guy who liked tacos and maybe liked me a little too. We grabbed a table near the window, the kind that let us watch people stroll by without feeling like we were on display. I ordered a couple of tacos, while Jamie went for something with shrimp and a side of guac, which he insisted was mandatory. The conversation started off easy, like a continuation of the night before: music, movies, the weird little things we both hated about our jobs. But gradually, it deepened. I found myself telling him about my family, stuff I usually keep wrapped up tight. Like how I'd grown up in a small town where being gay wasn't something you talked about openly, and how moving to the city was supposed to be a fresh start but often felt lonely. Jamie listened without interrupting, just nodding and giving me space to say what I needed to. When I finished, he reached across the table and said, "I get it. I moved here about 5 years ago, and it was rough at first. But you know what helped me? Finding people who made me feel like I belonged. Maybe that's what we're doing right now." I smiled, feeling this warm mix of relief and hope that I hadn't expected to find over tacos. There was something about him, honest, patient, and steady, that made me want to tell him everything. As the night went on, we shared more stories, more laughs, and even some awkward moments when I tried to impress him with my terrible jokes. At one point, Jamie leaned back, looked at me with that mischievous glint in his eyes, and said, "You know, I never thought I'd meet someone at a plasma center and end up having one of the best nights I've had in a long time." I laughed, feeling my cheeks flush. Yeah, me neither. I guess donating plasma is way better than I gave it credit for. Eventually, the restaurant started to quiet down, and we found ourselves lingering over our last bites, neither of us quite ready to call it a night. Jamie glanced at his watch and then back at me with a smile that made my heart skip. Same time next week, I felt a rush of excitement and a hint of nervousness all at once. Definitely, walking out into the cool night air, I realized that sometimes the strangest places lead to the best surprises. And honestly, I was already looking forward to the next donation day, not just for the plasma, but for the chance to see Jamie again. The week between that first dinner and our next meetup felt like the slowest and fastest thing all at once. On one hand, I kept telling myself to chill because, dude, it's just dinner, nothing crazy. But on the other, every little ping from my phone made me hope it was Jamie texting, confirming our plans, or just saying something random to keep the conversation rolling. When the next donation day finally came around, I found myself walking into the plasma center with a strange mix of anticipation and calm. Jamie was already there, of course, sitting in his usual chair, looking as relaxed as ever. I swear, the guy made sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs look like an art form. We greeted each other with the kind of friendly ease that made me think this was already turning into a thing. Like, maybe not let's move in together and adopt a dog thing, but definitely I want to see you again kind of thing. We joked about how we were becoming the center's unofficial mascot couple, and it felt good. No awkwardness, no overthinking, just two guys who happened to find each other in the most random place. After the donation was done, Jamie suggested we hit a nearby park. It was one of those unexpectedly warm spring days, the kind that's perfect for just sitting on a bench and watching the world go by. We found a spot under a big old oak tree, and for a while, we just sat there talking about everything and nothing. I told him about the book I was reading, a dumb sci-fi novel I'd gotten hooked on during a rough week. He talked about his dream of someday designing his own video game, something indie and quirky, just like him. I remember looking over and thinking how easy it was to just be myself around him. No filters, no pretending. I even admitted, which is rare for me, that I felt a little alone when I first moved to the city. Jamie nodded like he understood completely, and then said, "Well, I'm glad you're not alone anymore. At least not while you're with me." I don't think I said anything for a moment, because all I could do was smile and let the quiet settle between us. That kind of silence where you don't feel pressured to fill it. You just enjoy it because the other person is there. A couple of weeks passed, and our dinners turned into weekend hangouts. We explored late-night coffee shops, went to art shows, and even tried a salsa dancing class, which was mostly me stepping on his toes and laughing my way through it. Jamie was patient and encouraging, like he genuinely enjoyed seeing me stumble through something new. I hadn't realized how much I missed that kind of simple connection until it was back. One night, after a particularly goofy dance class, we grabbed slices of pizza from a hole-in-the-wall place and sat on the curb outside. The city lights twinkled in the distance, and I felt this quiet happiness settle over me. Jamie looked over at me with that half smile, the one that made my stomach flip. "You know," he said, "I was thinking about how weird it is that we met donating plasma. Like, who even does that for the social scene?" I laughed, taking a bite of my slice. "Apparently we do." He nudged me playfully and then got a little more serious. "I really like this. Us. I wasn't expecting anything when I asked you out, but now I don't want it to be just a thing that happened between donations." For a second, I felt the usual walls I put up start to crumble. I wanted to tell him the same thing, but words got stuck somewhere in my throat. Instead, I reached for his hand, and when he intertwined his fingers with mine, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I'm glad you said that," I said quietly, "because I feel the same." That moment, sitting there on the curb with pizza grease on our fingers and the city buzzing around us, felt like the first real step into something honest. Something that wasn't just a random encounter or a nice distraction, but maybe the start of whatever comes after the honeymoon phase. Real life, messy, and somehow still full of hope. Of course, it wasn't all perfect. There were days when I caught myself worrying about where this was going, if Jamie felt the same way I did. There were moments when my overthinking kicked in, and I wondered if I was moving too fast or not fast enough. But Jamie's steady presence made it easier to lean into those feelings instead of running from them. One Sunday, we found ourselves back at the Plasma Center, not because we needed to donate, but because there was a little community event going on, something about raising awareness. Jamie dragged me along, saying it would be fun, and you know what? It was. We ran into a few of the regulars, got some free snacks, and even signed up for a raffle. Sitting there with Jamie, watching him light up when he talked about the importance of giving back, made me realize how much more there was to him than just a cute smile and good taco recommendations. Afterward, as we walked back to the subway, Jamie suddenly stopped and looked at me with that serious but soft gaze. "Hey," he said, "thanks for being you. For giving this a shot." I shrugged, feeling a little awkward, but mostly happy. "I should be the one thanking you for asking me out and sticking around." He grinned and pulled me into a quick, sweet kiss. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, just honest and warm like everything else about us. And in that moment, I knew that sometimes the best stories start in the most unexpected places, even if it's a plasma donation center. Because sometimes, all it takes is one simple question to change your whole story. After that kiss on the subway platform, things between Jamie and me settled into this weirdly comfortable rhythm. It wasn't fireworks every day, more like this slow, steady burn kind of thing that felt real and promising, even when life threw in its usual chaos. We started hanging out more on weekends, sometimes just crashing at my place or his, ordering way too much takeout and binge-watching random shows. Jamie had this habit of making weird snack combinations, like peanut butter and pickles, and honestly, I thought he was joking the first time he offered me one. But hey, I tried it. Not bad, actually. One Saturday afternoon, I was at Jamie's apartment, helping him put together some new shelves he'd bought. Neither of us is exactly DIY expert, which meant more laughing and some questionable hammer swings than real progress. The place was small but cozy, with these big windows that let in the afternoon sun and a bunch of plants that Jamie swore he hadn't killed yet. As I was struggling to line up a shelf with the brackets, Jamie just leaned against the wall and watched me with that soft smile he has when he thinks I don't notice. I paused and looked over, wiping sweat from my forehead. "You know, if you wanted me to do all the work, you could have just said so." He laughed, that warm, easy laugh that made me feel like I was home. "I'm just here for moral support." I rolled my eyes and went back to wrestling with the shelf, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was really lucky to have someone like him around. Someone who didn't mind my awkwardness, my overthinking, or my tendency to get way too invested in terrible TV shows. That night, we cooked dinner together. Well, Jamie cooked, and I mostly tried not to burn anything while watching. We sat on the floor with our plates, legs crossed like we were teenagers, sneaking snacks in their bedrooms, and talked about everything from travel dreams to embarrassing childhood stories. I told him about the time I accidentally set off the fire alarm trying to make toast. Jamie laughed so hard he almost snorted wine out of his nose, and I knew right then that I could tell him anything. But, of course, it wasn't all perfect all the time. There were moments when I caught myself wondering what this all meant. Like, was Jamie feeling the same way I was? Was I reading too much into things? And even though he was great at making me feel comfortable, I wasn't always great at opening up about my fears. One night, after a long day at work, when my brain wouldn't shut off, I found myself texting Jamie in the middle of the night, more out of restlessness than anything else. After a few back and forths, he suggested we meet up and just hang out. No pressure, no agenda. I went over to his place, and we ended up sitting on his balcony, wrapped up in blankets, watching the city lights flicker. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. After a while, Jamie turned to me and said softly, "It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too." I looked at him, all vulnerable and open, and it hit me how rare that kind of honesty is. "Yeah," I said, "but maybe that's what makes this worth it." He squeezed my hand, and somehow that small gesture told me everything I needed to know. As the weeks turned into months, we kept building this quiet, steady connection. We had our ups and downs, like when Jamie got frustrated with work, or when I had a rough family call that left me feeling raw. But through it all, we kept showing up for each other. One evening, we went back to that taco joint where it all started. The place was just as unassuming as before, but this time, we had a little more history between us. We sat in our usual spot, sharing a basket of nachos and laughing about how awkward our first dinner had been. Jamie reached out and took my hand across the table. "I'm really glad you said yes that night," he said. I smiled, feeling my heart swell a bit. "Me too." And as we sat there, with the hum of the restaurant around us, I realized that sometimes the best stories aren't the ones you plan. They're the ones that catch you off guard. In the middle of donating plasma, over tacos, and quiet moments on a balcony. The ones that start small but grow into something real. I don't know what the future holds for us, but right now, with Jamie's hand in mine and the city lights twinkling outside, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. After that night at the taco joint, things between Jamie and me felt like they'd settled into a comfortable groove. Not the kind of groove where everything's predictable and boring, but the kind that makes you feel safe to be yourself. Flaws, weird habits, and all. I never thought I'd say this, but I was actually looking forward to our Friday plasma appointments. Not because of the donation itself, obviously, but because I got to see Jamie. Even if it was just for a couple of hours, it was a highlight. One Friday, a few weeks after that dinner, Jamie and I ended up arriving at the donation center almost at the same time. We joked about how we must have synchronized our schedules on purpose. He said, "What can I say? I'm committed to the cause and to you." I rolled my eyes but smiled because, honestly, I was just as invested. The usual beep and hum of the machines filled the background as we settled into our chairs side by side. We made small talk at first. Work complaints, the weather, the ever-mysterious vending machine snacks, but it wasn't long before the conversation shifted to something deeper. "I've been thinking," Jamie said, looking over at me with a slightly serious expression, "about us." I felt a little jolt in my chest. "Yeah, what about us?" He shrugged like it was the easiest thing in the world. "I guess I'm wondering where this is headed. I mean, I like what we have, but I don't want to be that guy who lets something good slip by because he's afraid to say it." I blinked, surprised that he was the one putting it out there so clearly. I'd been doing the usual dance of hoping he felt the same way, but also preparing for things to stay as they were. "I like you, Jamie. I think I'm falling for you." His face lit up, that same warm smile that had caught me from day one. "Good, because I'm definitely falling for you too." We sat there for a moment, the machine humming between us, and it felt like the world outside had slowed down. I reached over and squeezed his hand, feeling a little dizzy from how real it all was. After the donation was done, Jamie suggested we grab a coffee at a nearby cafe. We walked there, hands brushing and then finally holding, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. At the cafe, the cozy atmosphere wrapped around us like a soft blanket. Jamie ordered his usual black coffee, and I went for a chai latte since I was feeling adventurous. We found a corner table and settled in, the afternoon sun streaming through the window. So, Jamie started, stirring his coffee slowly. What does falling for someone actually mean to you? I thought about it for a second. I guess it means feeling comfortable enough to be vulnerable, trusting someone enough to share your mess without fear. It's like finding someone who doesn't just accept your weirdness but actually loves it. He nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, exactly. It's scary, but it's also kind of freeing. We talked for hours about everything from childhood dreams to our biggest fears. Jamie told me about his family back in Oregon, how they didn't really get his art career but eventually came around. I shared stories about my summers working at a camp and how those simple days stuck with me. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Jamie invited me to an art show he was part of, a small exhibit featuring local artists. Honestly, I was nervous. I don't really know much about art, and I worried I'd feel out of place. But I didn't want to miss it, so I said yes. The gallery was tiny, packed with paintings, sketches, and installations that I mostly stared at with awe and a bit of confusion. Jamie was clearly in his element, chatting with other artists and explaining his pieces with passion. At one point, he took me to a corner where his work was displayed, a series of abstract prints inspired by cityscapes. "What do you think?" he asked, watching my face. I hesitated, wanting to say something smart, but what came out was honest. "I think it's like looking at the city through your eyes." Chaotic, but beautiful. He smiled, relieved. That's exactly what I wanted. After the show, we walked home under the stars, the city quiet and cool. Jamie slipped his hand into mine, and I felt that same steady warmth I'd come to crave. But the next few days weren't without their challenges. Work got stressful for both of us, and we found ourselves slipping into silence more than usual. One night, I caught myself worrying that maybe we were moving too fast, or maybe the distance between my feelings and his was bigger than I thought. I brought it up one evening over dinner at my place. Do you ever feel like we're rushing? Or maybe that I'm reading too much into things? Jamie looked at me with those honest eyes and shook his head. No, I think we're just figuring things out as we go. And that's okay. His words were like a balm. We spent the rest of the night talking, really talking, and it reminded me why this felt worth it. A few weeks later, Jamie surprised me with a weekend getaway. He found this cozy cabin not too far from the city, nestled in the woods. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when we pulled up and saw the little place surrounded by trees, I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in ages. We spent the weekend hiking, cooking together, and sitting by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. One night, wrapped in blankets on the porch, Jamie looked over at me and said, "I'm really happy we met where we did. It's kind of perfect, right? Plasma donation to this." I laughed, resting my head on his shoulder. Yeah, who knew saving lives could lead to all this? And I meant it. What started as a random coincidence had turned into something I never saw coming, but didn't want to let go of. With Jamie, I found a kind of quiet joy, the kind that sneaks up on you in the middle of the everyday and makes you believe in the unexpected. That weekend at the cabin was kind of a turning point for me. It was the first time I realized how much I wanted to bring Jamie into the bigger parts of my life, not just the fun, easy moments. Like, I wanted him to meet my friends, to see me doing my thing, not just the curated version I put out on dates or hangouts. So a couple of weeks after we got back, I invited him over for a small barbecue with some friends of mine. Nothing fancy, just a few people, beers on the deck, some music playing in the background. I was nervous, of course. Introducing someone new to your friends can feel like stepping into the unknown, especially when it's someone you're starting to care about. Jamie was chill about it, though. He showed up with his six-pack of craft beer and a big smile, like he was ready for whatever the night had in store. Honestly, that confidence made me relax a lot more. My friends took to him almost immediately. I think part of it was Jamie's easygoing nature and the way he didn't try to be anything other than himself. There was this one moment when my buddy Mike was telling a ridiculous story about his dog, and Jamie was laughing so hard you could tell it was genuine. That's when I felt this little swell of pride, like, yeah, this is someone I want in my corner. The night went on with a mix of silly conversations and quiet moments. At one point, Jamie and I found ourselves standing a little apart from the group, the hum of laughter and chatter floating around us like a comfortable blanket. He looked at me and said, "Your friends are great. I can see why you like hanging out with them." I smiled, feeling that familiar warmth spread through my chest. "I'm glad you think so. I wanted you to meet them because, well, they're part of my life. And I want you to be part of it too." He reached out, squeezed my hand gently, and said, "I want that too." Seriously, it felt like the kind of moment movies try to capture, but usually miss, the simple honesty of two people figuring out how to fit together. But like any real story, ours had its bumps. A few weeks later, Jamie got some tough news at work. His project was getting cut, and it threw him into this funk where he wasn't sure what was next. I saw him pull away a bit, quieter and more reserved than usual, and I hated feeling helpless. One night, after a long day, I went over to his place. He opened the door looking exhausted, like the weight of the world was sitting on his shoulders. "I'm sorry if I've been distant," he said quietly as I stepped inside. I shook my head. "You don't have to apologize. I get it, but I'm here, okay? Whatever you need." We ended up sitting on his couch talking late into the night. Jamie opened up about his fears, about failing, about not living up to expectations, about wondering if he was on the right path. It wasn't easy to hear, but it felt important. I told him what I hoped he already knew, that his worth wasn't tied to a job or a project, that I admired how passionate and talented he was, and that I believed in him, and that I wasn't going anywhere. It was one of those nights that deepened whatever we had, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real and raw. In the weeks that followed, Jamie started looking at new opportunities. I helped him with his portfolio, went with him to networking events, and cheered him on in every small victory. Seeing him regain his spark was like watching the sunrise after a storm. Around the same time, I realized I wanted to take a step forward, not because of some grand gesture, but because it felt right. So one evening, after a lazy Sunday spent cooking and binging terrible reality TV, I pulled out a little notebook I'd been scribbling in. "Hey," I said, holding it up, "do you want to see something?" Jamie raised an eyebrow but grinned. I flipped it open to a crudely drawn map of the city, with little notes and doodles marking all the places we'd been. The taco joint, the park by the plasma center, the cabin in the woods. On the last page, I'd written, "Our story so far, and the chapters to come." He laughed, a little surprised but clearly touched. "You're a dork, but I love this." I shrugged, feeling like a goofball but happy. I guess I just want us to keep making memories, to keep choosing each other. Jamie reached across the table, took my hand and said, "I'm all in. Wherever this goes, I'm with you." And just like that, the little moments we'd shared started to feel like something bigger. Like maybe, against all odds and plasma machines, we were building something real, something worth holding on to. Looking back, I never would have guessed that a random night donating plasma would lead me here. But sometimes, life surprises you in the best ways, when you're least expecting it, with someone you didn't know you were looking for. Months passed, and with every ordinary day Jamie and I shared, the extraordinary quietly took root. We settled into the kind of relationship that doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Just genuine moments, trust, and a steady presence. It wasn't always perfect. Life threw its curveballs, and sometimes we stumbled, unsure of how to navigate the unknown. But what mattered was that we faced those moments together, hand in hand. One chilly evening, I found myself walking to the plasma center again, this time not alone, but with Jamie by my side. We joked about how this place had become our unlikely meeting point, a spot where the hum of machines was the soundtrack to our early conversations. As we settled into our chairs, I glanced at him and realized how far we'd come, not just from that first awkward hello, but from the guarded versions of ourselves that had slowly peeled away. After the donation, we didn't rush off to a taco joint or a fancy dinner. Instead, we walked to the park nearby, the one where we'd spent that afternoon so many months ago. The city lights twinkled above, and the air held that quiet promise that comes with familiarity and comfort. Sitting on the bench under the same old oak tree, Jamie turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought donating plasma could lead to this. To us." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Neither did I, but I'm glad it did." He laughed softly. "Me too." There was no need for extravagant words, because in that simple moment, everything felt said. We leaned into each other, the space between us shrinking until it disappeared, a quiet kiss under the city's gentle glow. Walking home later, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the feeling of finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stay. The kind of connection that's built on small laughs, shared struggles, and the courage to be vulnerable. Looking back, the Plasma Center wasn't just where we met. It was where our story began, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected places hold the biggest surprises. And sometimes, all it takes is a simple question, a little courage, and the willingness to say yes. Because in the end, love isn't about fireworks or grand declarations. It's about showing up, choosing each other every day, and finding joy in the quiet moments that become the heartbeat of a shared life. And that's exactly what Jamie and I are doing. One plasma donation, one taco, one laugh at a time.